I have this really weird obsession with the Elder Scrolls and their concepts that definitely derive from the much larger and esoteric facets of our real world. I also have always had this large obsession with our real world's esoteric knowledge. Things like the occult and mystery religions, they've always piqued my interest. Even things such as cryptozoology found itself in my search history. I'm openly a Christian, and these things are usually frowned upon in mainstream Christianity and are looked at as heretical to learn about. I, however, defy that notion, but that is a topic for another day. For now, I want to use my obsession with mythologies and religions to connect with my obsession with the Elder Scrolls as mythology. I had this idea from Leftover Pat's video that details and explains the real-world inspirations for the main races of the Elder Scrolls. I'm surprised nobody made a video for one on the various gods and spirits, so I say to that, why not be the first? The missing god, known as Lorkhan to the elves, Sheor to the Bretons, Shezar to the Imperials, Lorkhaj to the Khajiit, Shor to the Nords, and Sept to the Red Guards, and he's also known as Doomdrum. But just for consistency purposes, I refer to him mostly as just Lorkhan. Lorkhan is the trickster god responsible for the creation of Mundus, the mortal plane, and mortals in general in the Elder Scrolls universe. Lorkhan is said to have sacrificed his life in tricking the Aedra to create Mundus while sacrificing their own power. While the races of men see the missing god as the sole reason of their existence, the elves or Mer races see the missing god as robbing them of their divinity and trapping them to mortality. I wanted to start with Lorkhan because I think his inspirations are a lot more interesting than the surface level. The first inspiration I think that is the closest parallel, at least to his relationship with the human races of Tamriel, would be Prometheus, the Titan god and hero who created man and bestowed the gift of fire to man. For his transgressions, Prometheus was doomed to an eternal punishment by Zeus to be chained and have an eagle feast on his liver daily, and in being an immortal Titan, it would always grow back to once again be eaten the next day. This myth also fits the trickster part and defying the other gods, like how Lorkhan defied the other gods and in some theories was actually killed by Trinamach and Akatosh. But where it gets interesting is when we get to the elves' perspective in finding the real world inspiration. In the Nag Hammadi text, there's this mention of Yaldabaoth, the demiurge and malevolent creator god of the material world in Gnostic mythology. Yaldabaoth was the child of Sophia, the Aeon, wisdom. After realizing she made a mistake in giving birth to Yaldabaoth, Sophia throws Yaldabaoth into the chaotic nothingness to try and hide her mistakes from the monad and the pleroma. Yaldabaoth, being left and bound to the chaotic nothingness, he creates the material world, a world made of his own arbitrary concepts like fear, hate, and domination. He claims himself to be the one only true God, and from this, Sophia confronts him in an attempt to stop him. Yaldabaoth then steals some of the divine energy from the pleroma and uses it to eventually trap Sophia when she came to confront her child in his wrongdoings. With this, he bounds her to his physical world, while other beings such as the Christ, also in an attempt to save Sophia, have parts of themselves bound to his material creation as well. Gnosticism gets so much more complex than this and will require its own section, but the point here is the shocking similarity between Lorkhan and Yaldabaoth creating the material world and essentially being malevolent tricksters trapping other godlike beings in his creation. The elves feel that their divinity was stolen by Lorkhan and want to escape the material world and go back to being the Adada, the original spirits. I probably just butchered that. Et Ada, who cares? Magnus is the god of magic and the sun, the literal son of the Elder Scrolls. When Lorkhan tricked the Aedra into creating Mundus, Magnus was initially the architect of the world. When he realized what Lorkhan was doing, he fled Mundus by tearing a hole all the way to Aetherius, creating what we now know as the sun. The sun is the source of magic in the Elder Scrolls, as it is literally Aetherius bleeding into the mortal world. His closest real inspiration would probably be Helios. Helios in Greek mythology is the titan that is said to be the literal sun. It isn't really as interesting or intriguing as Lorkhan's inspirations in that regard, but but I do find a few more things interesting about Magnus's inspirations. As the god of magic, you can draw loose inspirations to gods like maybe Hecate, Thoth, and maybe Odin, but a really big connection I draw Magnus to is the grand architect of the universe. In Freemasonry and other brotherhoods like Rosicrucianism, the grand architect of the universe is essentially a much more neutral and vague depiction of the Abrahamic God. To be initiated in these esoteric brotherhoods, you have to have some belief in a singular higher existence, whether you're a Christian, a Jewish person, a Muslim, or even many of the traditional North American faiths of old like the Iroquois, is enough to be initiated. Depending on the region, the central text of a lodge would either be the Bible if you were in, say, a Christian dominant religion like the southern United States, a Quran if you're in the lodge that's in maybe like Saudi Arabia or somewhere in the Middle East, and the Torah as the central text in a country like Israel. Sure, Magnus is revered as the architect of the universe, which draws his similarities there, but he's also seen as a very far removed and much more esoteric deity, much like the grand architect of the universe to Freemasonry or Rosicrucianism. He rejected giving his power to the mortal realm, which alienates him from the common or traditional religion of the imperial pantheon's 8 or 9 divines. Magnus at times can inhabit the bodies of mages and lend them his power, making them stronger, as well as bestowing magical artifacts like the Staff of Magnus or the Eye of Magnus. He has no clear motive as to why or how he does these things, which definitely makes him not a malevolent deity, but very much an unaccounted for one. He has various cults of those who want to study and become stronger in magic, but he's not on the same lines to that of the divines, much like Freemasonry's view of God in opposition to the traditional Christian's view of God. The primordial personification force of stasis and order, while not technically a god in the traditional sense of a sentient or personal being, Anu represents the light side of a dualistic nature to his counterpart, Padomay, the creative force of chaos. Anu, the everything, encompasses, in lack of term, is everything. He is light, order, and stasis. Anu, in wanting to know himself, created a soul for himself, Anuiel, and with that soul and the ability to self-reflect and know himself, Anuiel created also Ariel, who we will soon know of as the Elvish version of Akatosh. So, from first glance, other than sharing the same name as a real-world chief deity of the ancient Sumerian religion, the real-world counterpart of the Anuic figure would probably be the deist's version of the Abrahamic God. Deism teaches that God created the universe but is an impersonal being and allowed nature to run its course on its own. This relation reflects and encompasses Anu's nature as more of a force than a god to be worshipped. Another big correlation I found is in Anu's relationship to Padomay. They strangely mirror the dualistic nature found in the main two deities of Zoroastrianism, Angra Mainyu, and Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda in Zoroastrianism is the chief force of good, and Angra Mainyu being its counterpart, the force of evil and destruction. Anu's relationship to Anuiel and Ariel can in some ways mirror Yahweh or the Father's relationship to Jesus. While mainline Christianity teaches that Jesus and Yahweh are the same being in different persons, there are some sects that share a Binitarian or even a separationist view of these figures, like the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Latter-day Saints, or as I said earlier, the Gnostics, and that Jesus is a lower and separate being from the creator of the Abrahamic being, or I guess force in this case. I also would like to draw a slight relation to Olorun and Orunmila in the Yoruba religion. Olorun being the chief creative force of the universe, and Orunmila being the oldest child and able to witness Olorun create the universe. Though probably the biggest inspiration for Anu would most likely be the concept of Brahman in Hinduism. Brahman is the cosmic universal consciousness that encompasses all of life and the supreme creator force from which all things come from. Now, not to be confused with Brahma, which shares relation but aren't quite the same thing. Brahman is an abstract concept or force representing reality or the cosmos, while Brahma is the creator god that came forth into creation from Brahman, which is a striking mirror to Anu and Anuiel. Another link to Anu is that with the concept of Brahman comes the teaching of Atman, or the universal self. Just how Anu created Anuiel to know himself, Atman is the concept that teaches that all beings have the God consciousness of Brahman that dwells within their soul. In some teachings, it is believed that once samsara, or the cycle of life and death, is broken or liberated, also a concept called moksha, it is believed that the soul returns to Brahman as it was initially an attempt for the God consciousness to know itself. This is another alarming mirror, as the elves believe they are descended from the Ada, or original spirits. In Elvish, Adra means our ancestors. The primordial force of chaos and change. As I've already spent time talking about Anu, to sum up Padomay is to say he is everything Anu is not. If Anu is all things, Padomay is the opposite, the force of chaos that dwells within the void, which is an actual realm that exists beyond the known realms of the Arbus. In similarity to Anu creating Anuiel as his soul, Padomay created Sithis. Sithis in turn created the aforementioned Lorkhan, just as Anuiel created Ariel or Akatosh, as mentioned before. While I didn't find any striking or interesting parallels to Padomay like the previous entries, and I already drew the parallel to Ambrahmanu of Zoroastrianism, I do think that Padomay much closely resembles both Chaos and Tartarus from Greek mythology. While Tartarus is best known as the lowest part of the underworld of Greek mythology, he's also known as the primordial god of the abyss. He was one of the first beings to exist alongside Gaia, Eros, and of course Chaos. While linking him to Chaos is more obvious, I threw in Tartarus because of Padomay's relationship to Sithis and Lorkhan. Tartarus gave birth to Typhon, the king of monsters, and representation of the concept of destructive and violent storms and fire. Much like Lorkhan, Typhon was a bane to the Olympian gods and had to be defeated by Zeus for his destruction of the heavens. Another counterpart to Padomay would be Yam, the Canaanite god of primordial chaos and the sea. Now for the non-divines, I won't go as far into their introductions for the sake of laziness and time. Also, they're more known in the games. If you play any of the games like Skyrim, Oblivion, or even the Elder Scrolls Online, you'll quickly learn about these beings on your travels. So with that said, Akatosh as the dragon god of time resembles Kronos from Greek mythology, though I think his closest resemblance would be that of Janus, the Roman god of time, beginnings and ends, and transitions. Both statues of Akatosh and Janus are personified as having multiple heads, one looking forward and one looking back, to signify their place in time. In the aspect of Akatosh having multiple forms like Ariel and even Alduin in the Nordic religion, this relates to him to the Hinduistic trinity, Brahma the creator relating to Ariel, Vishnu the preserver relating to Akatosh, and Shiva the destroyer relating to Alduin. As for Alduin himself, just while we're here, I think he's a weird hodgepodge mix of Nidhogg and Jormungandr from Norse mythology, a draconic figure that will devour the world, the gods, and everything beyond. The god of birth and deaths, who is also said to be a syncretic god created from the merging of Orki, the god of mortality from Old Nordic religion, and Xerxes, the god of esoteric knowledge and ancestry of the elven pantheons. While a lot could be said about the syncretic part of RK, his main imperial depiction more closely resembles that of Osiris, the Egyptian god of the underworld, resurrection, and fertility. You can also throw in Aletheia, the Greek goddess of childbirth and midwifery. Not to delve too much into Orki and Xerxes, as they deserve their own solo entry, it gets interesting as it theorizes that RK was once mortal. Mantling in the Elder Scrolls is a concept that if you start becoming so much like something, you'll eventually become it. So, in the theory, a previous Kalpa, or another name for it, a cycle of life, RK was once a mortal who mantled Orki and Xerxes so much, the next cycle he became associated with the concept of birth and death. The Sigic Order, an order of powerful mages, believed that the gods were once mortal whose power and determinations granted them a greater influence in the following Kalpa. In that sense, RK and the Elder Scrolls entirely resemble the Hinduistic belief of the previous mentioned moksha and a type of apotheosis. This also parallels the Chinese myths and perspectives of their version of apotheosis, like gods like Guan Yu and Mazu, who were once just exceptional humans who eventually became gods. The goddess of beauty, love, and art and music is probably inspired by the fusion of Apollo and Aphrodite. Apollo, the music and art side, while Aphrodite having the beauty, love, and sex part. Another parallel could be Saraswati of Hindu mythology, pretty much the Hindu version of the mix of Aphrodite and Apollo. In the lore, many sex workers in the Elder Scrolls lore revere Dibella as well. So from that I can draw comparisons to Padomay Shen from Chinese mythology, Ashtoreth from the Phoenicians, and Ishtar of the Babylonians, as many worshippers of these gods practice sex work as well. The god of wisdom and logic, I quickly draw to Athena of Greek myth. However, her wisdom was more in battle strategy. Thoth seems to be the much more direct inspiration, as Julianos is often the god of mages as well as scholars. Julianos is also the god of mathematics, which the Egyptians are thought to be significantly responsible for developing to its modern senses, mainly in things like geometry and the base 10 number system we use today. Kinnereth, or Khan by the Nords, is the goddess of the heavens, the winds, the elements, and the air. She also is responsible for gifting the Nords with the voice, the ability to learn and use the dragon language, which is a type of tonal magic that manipulates reality. She was also the first spirit to agree to create the mortal plane and provide the space for the mortal realm. Her real-world inspiration would probably just be Njord, but you can draw inspirations to Zeus or pretty much any type of sky deity, just putting them in a female counterpart version, I guess. The goddess of love, marriage, and compassion, Mara is one of the few divines that is universally worshipped, similar to Akatosh. The Dunmer and Argonians even have versions of her in their pantheons. A big inspiration most draw due to her depictions are that of the Queen of Heaven or the Madonna. This figure is present in most Christian sects like Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, but is a common concept that spans to lots of religions that predate Christianity as such. Similar to Hera in Greek mythology, Minerva in Roman mythology, Frigg of the Aesir in Norse mythology, Ongtu and Bon Guyet, I don't really know how to pronounce that, of Vietnamese mythology. Ugaritic texts and even the Holy Bible recognize Ishtar as the Queen of Heaven in the book of Jeremiah. This relates to Mara well in the account that she's so widely and symbolically worshipped in multiple cultures around Tamriel. The god of mercy and righteous might. I think this one is the most clear to that of the common Christian depiction of God. While Stendar isn't triune, he is worshipped for his mercy to the benevolent, but serves as the judge and executioner to those of evil like Daedra and other violent creatures. While Jesus isn't called a God of mercy, traditionally in the text, there are multiple texts throughout the Holy Bible that reference God as being merciful and just, but also, and especially in the book of Revelations, as a destroyer of all evil things. The vigilance of Stendar and the Elder Scrolls mirror the Crusaders of Catholicism during the medieval era, having an all-out war with the Muslims for control. Similar to the vigilance of Stendar hunting vampires, werewolves, witches, but specializing in prominently in hunting lesser Daedra and Daedra worshippers. Jesus is also known to have performed exorcisms, which the church still does to this day. The god of work, trade, and commerce, without being too drawn out, his clear representation is that of Mercury of Roman myth. Hermes could similarly resemble the role, but Mercury was much more centralized with commerce than Hermes was. The hero god of man, war, and governance. Similar to RK, Talos is a god that was once immortal, whether he was solely the dragon-born Tiber Septim, the man who conquered all of Tamriel with the Numidium, a brass mech that was powered by the heart of the previous mentioned god Lorkhan, or if he was mantled to Talos as an amalgamation of Tiber Septim, Zurin Arctis, a powerful mage, and Ysmir Wulfhoth, an ancient king of Skyrim. The coolest irony is that Talos shares the same name with the giant bronze, for lack of a better word, robot created by Hephaestus in Greek myth and filled with a golden ichor which is said to be the blood of the gods. That was a clear inspiration for the Numidium. Tiber Septim used to help him conquer all of Tamriel and reunite the provinces under one empire. Talos also shares large inspirations to Thor and Tyr of Norse mythology, being a hero god of mankind and a god of war, respectively. His amulet even resembles the amulets worshippers of Thor would wear. You can also draw clear correlations to demigods like Heracles or the previous mentioned Guan Yu, but mainly I wanted to draw the correlation of Talos to that of the Ascended Masters in Theosophy. The theory is that Tiber Septim reached what is known as Kim. Kim is a rabbit hole, but on the surface level, to have the best understanding, I would rather explain it in an example. So, say you're asleep and you're dreaming. While in the dream, you begin to realize you're in a dream and you enter a state known as lucid dreaming and essentially begin to have full control over your dream. Now, apply that to reality. You essentially have unlimited control over reality. This is more powerful than the Aedra or Daedra. The catch is, you lose a lot of your ambitions as you realize the true world around you isn't as real and have no strive to achieve or change anything. Similarly, the Ascended Masters were humans that believed that they raised their consciousness to such a higher level, they can essentially live and operate in an entirely different dimension or concept that's alien to us. Lastly, Talos in his Kim sense can go back to Azathoth. Azathoth is the omnipotent supreme being that created the cosmos in H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, the blind idiot god or the mindless lord of nighted chaos. I'll also save this for another time, as Azathoth can link to another concept in Elder Scrolls known as the Dreamer, which goes down a larger rabbit hole theorizing what the Arbus and the Godhead of the Elder Scrolls even are. If you like this video, I would definitely like to do a part 2 and begin explaining the real world inspirations to the Daedric princes and the much more obscure gods like the Earthbones, gods from other pantheons like the Red Guards or Argonian pantheons, and of course the idea of the Dreamer and Amaranth. The Godhead, not the stream. Never mind.